Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Dark Winds. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we got that opening sequence 5 months before the heist. And we finally find out what it is that our Father So and our mysterious guy, which we later on find his name's Frank, and we find out Father So isn't Benjamin So, but James So. We find out they're part of a group known as Buffalo Society. So kind of fills in some of the blanks about what they were talking about with Wanda, where it's like, oh, this is about the cause and stuff. Well, they're they're a group. It's almost like a freedom fighters group, but maybe that's not the right analogy or phrasing to use. But basically, they're fighting against. It's basically like, hey, let's take back what the white man took from us, type of situation of like, right, for so long, so much was taken from us, and it continues to be taken from us, and that basically they fight against any attempt by anyone to try and buy up like native land to do whatever they want to, because the guy BJ ended up buying up the area where the mine is and stuff. The same one, because he's the dude that took over the mining operation that ended up exploding 3 years ago. And the Buffalo Society was telling him, like, no, you can't do that. We won't be paid off. But he's like, yeah, I already kind of got the rights to the land. But they're like, no, you haven't heard the last of us. And now we get to see how everything kind of played out. Because I was wondering how they were going to battle him by robbing that. I was like, what was that? So, but it's like, right, they needed the capital, I guess, to fulfill their plan. Once again, this is a fault for the cause. I think Wanda's a part of the cause. So is Sally's mom. But Home Dude isn't. Well, I don't know how into it Wanda was. Was she just into it for the money's sake? Did she just kind of get accidentally dragged into it? We don't really fully know. Because she doesn't seem like she's as dedicated to the cause like Frank and James are. But yeah, to the point they ended up killing the pilot, which I pretty much figured as much. But then also, it turns out they also ended up killing Raymond. Poor Raymond, he just did what Jim and Joe asked him to do, and it kind of got him killed. But he had already sold off the helmet he found. They don't know that though, but they had killed him because it's like, right, you're digging for evidence and we need to keep this tight. We can't let anyone find the helicopter and know for sure that we're on the reservation, that we're hiding out here. So, but it's too late because the kid who trains and takes care of Bernadette's horses, that kid bought the helmet. The moment he bought the helmet, I was like, oh, no, please. I mean, jumping around a little bit, but luckily Bernadette got the helmet. I was like, oh, thank God. Because I was about to say, because they're not going, James is going to justify. I was like, right, we got to, kill someone. Because even Frank felt bad about killing Raymond because it's like, right, that's one more, deny, because as they say, like, call Navajo to white people. I thought that was kind of interesting. I guess it's kind of like that thing of like an Anglo-Saxonation of their tribe, like their tribe's actual name is calling them Navajo. I thought that was kind of interesting. Or maybe it's just kind of like, maybe it's more specifically it's probably like a very crude translation. Like Navajo is like the English version, but it's like no, like I said, is it deny is like probably like specifically in their language is probably specifically how they refer to their tribe. That's probably like that's the real name. Navajo is kind of like the crude translation, I guess, to some extent. But nevertheless, for Frank, he feels back as like, right, we're killing more of our own people, and it's like, and James is like, yeah, sacrifices have to be made for the greater good, and he's like, yeah, but I was hoping, can't we save them all? And for James, it's like, yeah, but that's only something the creator can do. Plus, we're not that naive. And I thought that was kind of interesting because it's like, yeah, there are going to be sacrifices that have to be made, but it's for the greater good. We're fighting for a much larger cause. Yeah, we might have to do some bad. Yeah, we might have to do some evil. We might have to kill some people. Once killing white people, that's fine. It's retribution for all the lives that have been lost in the past over the centuries because of them, Because I even love that, like, BJ was like, oh, I haven't been here that long. And then James laughed. It's like, you've been here for 6 centuries. Like, shut up. it's that, but it's like that's also like the Mormon family too. It's kind of there too, as you know. It's like, yeah, think of it as retribution because you devils knocked on our door, essentially. But it is that. But it is like I figured as much, that it is a situation of they are, and it's a cause you can get behind. You just, the way you go about it isn't how you should go about it. But for them, it's like this is the only way you make change. Yeah, things have to get nasty and bloody because I'm sure for them it's like it's the only response people would be able to understand. It's like you have to respond with money and violence to kind of get your point across for their people, for everyone's sake. They have to do this. So, but it doesn't take long before Joe and Jim find out about James because they already knew about the letter and he doesn't know they knew about the letter. But what I thought was interesting when he came to like Barry's father, Jim's like, "Oh, do you have any other family?" And then James messed up and said, "No, I don't." In that moment, I was like, "Wait, what?" Because even Joe looked at him because I was like, because I think they played it at the beginning too, but I was like, "Wait, didn't he tell Joe he didn't have any family?" And the moment they left, Joe was like, "Yeah, he told me he didn't have any family." I was like, "Yeah, why would you all of a sudden bring up some brother?" And you try to be like, "Oh yeah, you have some troublemaker brother," because I guess he figured like Joe must have found out. It's like, right, doing enough digging, Joe's good at his job. He'll find out about my brother, so I'll mention it now. But it's like problem. Because there's no way he would have known that. Because I know the letter was at Lester's shop, but I'm like, not unless Wanda read it and like was like, "Oh yeah, there's a letter that came in from your brother," so maybe that made him decide to do that. I don't know. Because I don't think that came up during. Yeah, definitely didn't come up during the conversation Wanda, and Frank had last episode. So that makes me go, when could, I guess he just like forgot he told Joe that. I guess like when you're balancing so many lies, you don't remember who you told what to. So he kind of screwed the pooch there. I mean, to be fair, they were already suspicious of him. This just added more to it. So they end up searching because he tried to throw his brother on the bus, which he was throwing himself under the bus by being like, "Oh yeah, he always had authority issues." And I love that Joe is like, "Yeah, I know the type." It's like, the funny thing is because he is the type. He talked about he was always kind of had issues with authority. And I think that element comes like circling through in this episode too, but we'll get to that later. Joe and Jim ended up going through some old school files and stuff for the church, like a Sunday school of sorts, or just like a church school of sorts, because James went. I'm assuming Benjamin went as well, but James apparently like burned, at least was suspected of like burning down the chapel or something. I was like, that's hardcore. So. But they looked into it and they found out about James and Benjamin, that they are twins, except James wears glasses. So that was interesting. But along with that, we got this interesting thing from Joe, where Joe admitted that he went to, simulation school. And Bernadette had mentioned in the last episode she went to a boarding school. I think what I was thinking of with her boarding school was a simulation school that Joe went to. I think that's what I was thinking. I don't know if they are similar in that regard, but it's kind of like, right, you're forced to go to this particular school, which Joe was like, yeah, everyone else was dragged from their homes. He didn't. He kind of went somewhat willingly because his parents wanted him to, and he'd do whatever his parents asked him to do. But the moment he got there, they cut his hair, they took his clothes, but they couldn't break his spirit. He was like, no, it took something else entirely to do that, which I can only assume it was him losing JJ. I think that's probably what ended up doing, or maybe he was kind of referencing something else. Maybe it is I'm assuming it had to be the JJ situation, but it's one of those situations where it's like he went to that school. His parents made him go willingly because it's like, right, with this you'll assimilate and maybe you'll fit in more and won't have to always be like seen as other and ostracized. Like maybe that's why they were probably hoping, they thought it would be better for him in the long run. So I wonder is that part of why Joe does have the authority issues that he does, just because of that. I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting. We also find out that Wanda isn't dead. She's just she's in a coma from the Black Widow. I even love that when I went in to see Lester. He's like, "Oh my God, you heard her tell me Wanda's dead." It's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, Lester, like, at least keep up the fraud. But it's like, yeah, why pretend? We know you don't have, it's kind of no love lost when it comes to Wanda. So, like, why put on the, like, because he didn't put on a fake tear, so he saw them. He was almost like, okay, gotta get in the camera. Oh my God, Wanda. Oh, can't believe Wanda. Oh, she's in, okay. Yeah, she's in a coma. He's like, okay, so no getting any information out of her. But the main focus of the episode is them tracking down Frank because they got his name from Emma, who got it from Sally last episode. Which I love that whole thing of like Jim being like, "Oh, your deputy came through," and it's like, "Yeah, she did." And then like Bernadette, someone's like, "What?" And Joe had to be like, Emma, and it's like, oh, okay. It's like, that's a little bit of a bit between them of how that's his deputy, which I thought was kind of interesting. Fascinating to know that, like, I guess that's a thing between him and Jim. I guess it was like an inside joke, but I guess he doesn't typically refer to Emma as his deputy because Bernadette was like, wait, what? Who are you talking about? So I just thought that was kind of interesting. What I also thought was fascinating is that Jim decided to invite that Joe, I keep doing that, sorry. Joe invited Jim over for dinner, and like him and Emma definitely got to like hit it off, and I thought that was kind of nice. And them sharing RCs, he's like, "Whoa, those are the last two in the refrigerator." She's like, "Oh, I guess you're just gonna be drinking water tonight, huh?" I love it. Part of me wonders, was that her kind of getting back at him with the whole Sally thing, because he's saying that Sally should stay at like a shelter and not with them. We'll kind of get into that because that break comes up, you know, during the discussion, but there was kind of laughter around the table, and that's extra reason why Emma wants Sally to stay here, but like her and Jim kind of Joe, I keep doing that. Sorry, her and Joe end up keep butting heads about it, and you know Jim ended up leaving because it's like super awkward. And then partway through the argument, Joe says, "Sit down, Joe," and it's like, ooh, it just that was kind of like the nail in the coffin to the whole thing. And like he left. Emma was upset, and that's just the thing, because I think on some level Joe feels like letting Sally stay, it's like, right, it's not, he probably, because I think for him he feels like it's not the solution you think it is, Emma. Because I think for him he thinks Emma's probably using it to fill that void with Joe Jr., but it's like, I think she would say like, no, I know Joe is gone. Nothing's ever going to fill that void, but we can't let this house be a tomb of us. Like, yeah, we're going on every day, not talking about him. We remember it, but it's like, we don't really talk about it. And it's just like, it's just this unspoken thing between us. It's just like, right, like, are we just going to like go the rest of our lives like this? It's like, especially because Emma herself can never have any more children, so losing him, like, there's a weight to that. So, but maybe that's why Joe doesn't want to bring Sally in, because he's like, it's not, you know, like I said, not going to fill that void. But it's like, I think Joe's not really considering Emma's feelings, and maybe to some extent he thinks he's being considerate because he doesn't want her to be heartbroken in the end, because it's like, right, this isn't our child, she's not our child, but... And I think for Emma, it's probably a thing of like, no, I know she's not, but she is someone that needs help. We need to help her. It's the right thing to do. So that was kind of interesting. I was really surprised. Well, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. The moment Frank's name got brought up, you had that look on Jim's face. I'm like, he knows exactly who this is. Turns out it's someone that him and High Pockets, Emmerich's character, have crossed paths with. They've come across the Buffalo Society, and now they're one step closer to ending, like, you know, making an arrest on this heist stuff. So, right, Jim's getting, about to do it again, jeez. Jim is getting everything he wants. He could get the job and position, and High Pocket's like, oh man. Once again, I'm just going to call him, because he doesn't get called by his name that often, and just Joe always refers to him as High Pocket, so I'm going to do that. But he's like, oh, you're going to finally, like, oh, you played Leaphorn so well. And he's kind of like, yeah, but you could tell the look on Jim's face. It's like he kind of felt bad about it. Because despite finding out he's an FBI agent, Joe still took him in. And it's like, even invited you over to his house because he likes you, he respects you, and kind of welcomed you in his house, especially with the whole Bernadette thing. It's like, oh, like, those two wouldn't kind of work out. And Emma's like, oh, I don't need to play matchmaker. And Joe's like, what, really? He's like, is that real? Is that true, Chi? He's like, wow, I completely, you guys fooled me. I completely didn't see that coming, him and Bernadette. And when the conversation had come up, Bernadette told Emma not to tell Joe, and Jim wanted to tell, Bernadette, like kind of get closer and everything, but, they kind of didn't pull the trigger on that. He was kind of waiting for the right time, and Joe had told him there is no right time. And the moment that kind of came up, you're like, yeah, there's probably going to be something that kind of interferes with that, and it does, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Frank, specifically, James knew that the cops were going to come and get him sooner or later, so he wanted him and Frank to set up a trap to basically kill both of them, which once again, Frank's like, that's more of our people we're going to be killing, but, it is what it is, kind of it's for the greater good, once again, it's for the cause, so sacrifices have to be made, so. But when the time comes for, them to, because every time, that's a tense situation they're walking into, but we as the audience know they're walking into a trap, especially as they're circling the house. You have James on the inside, has a gun pointed at Joe, then at another point he's got it pointed at Jim, because it's like Jim was literally in a situation, was that the first episode, when it went over to Sally's house and Frank had a gun on Jim then, but what really saved them was he noticed, was it Taco? Bernadette's horse that James had stolen, and he happens to look and he sees, on a higher elevation, he sees Frank, and it turns into a shootout. I even love at one point in time, James was trying to aim for Joe. Jim sees him, sticks his gun through the house and starts shooting. I'm like, yeah. But sadly, Frank almost had a lock on when it comes to Jim. Luckily, Bernadette showed up in time because she was in the area looking into because she found out about the helmet that Raymond had found, and she went to go check it out. And as she did, the shootout happened. But the moment Frank was okay, I was like, he's going to recognize Jim and it's going to be an issue. And yep, he does. Just as James is getting away, this is all going down. And it gets revealed like, oh, this is my favorite FBI agent. And it's like, oh boy. So Joe's pissed. Wait, you know him? You knew him this entire time? Bernadette's, wait, you're an FBI agent? Wait, you knew he was an FBI agent and didn't say anything? It's like, yeah, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Once again, that whole thing of, yeah, never a right time. This is the worst possible time. Because now Bernadette was like, oh, they were getting close. And he does like her, but it is that situation of like, oh, she's not going to forgive you so easily for lying to her. You've been lying about who you are from the very beginning. And she's probably going to be pissed at Joe, especially because it's like, right, he's like a father to her. So it's like, wait. Because now for Bernadette, it's like, right, how much of anything you've ever told me was the truth, which a lot of it was. He just admitted the fact he was an FBI agent. But Joe's a father figure to her, so she'll probably forgive him a lot easier than Jim, but still. And then what does Jim do later on? Shows up, suit and tie, like his FBI agent look. And they're taking Frank. But it's like, because what comes first and foremost is it's the heist. And then he tries to justify it to Joe by being like, don't worry, I'll help you out with that case. But Joe's like, I want nothing to do with you. I better not see you again. Because it's like you broke his trust. It's like, right, I knew who you were, an FBI agent, but I thought you had my back on this, and you went, because it's like, right, you're doing this for selfish reasons. I mean, that's the complicated thing about undercover work. You think it'll be easy, you'll be able to separate it, but he can't, because he didn't expect to like this place, because he hasn't been here in over 9 years or something, because it hasn't been his home for a very, very long time, especially because there's some part of it of like, right, him and his mom were ostracized from their home, and so he's got no love for this place. But now being back, being around Joe, being around Emma, being around Bernadette, that changed things. It felt like he was around his community again, the community that he had kind of lost touch with for a while. So there's layers upon once again it being high pocket saying right, remember what tribe you're a part of, and he chose this tribe when he should have chose Joe and them, and it kind of leads to them duking it out because Jim said, oh, maybe they're right, you are too close to this. Joe hit him and they tussle, and Jim Joe knows he probably shouldn't have done that, but it was like, right, he was just upset, and both of them walked away from this super upset, you know? It was like, I don't know how you thought this was going to go over so smoothly. So there's all of that. There's also, once again, their third partner in all of this. He wanted his money and wanted to bounce because, well, for one, this is their fight. It's not his. He saw an opportunity to make money. I'm a piece of this puzzle, but it's like, yeah, I just want to get mine and bounce. You know, like the whole kidnapping the Mormon family, keeping them trapped. He's like, this wasn't part of the plan. Now things are changing. So what does he do? He decides, because they didn't show up, because it's like after they kill the cops, they were supposed to show up with his share of the money and whatnot. They never showed up. And he's like, all right, I see how it is. So he goes to BJ to backstab them. But I'm like, BJ's going to end up killing you, isn't he? Like after he finds out the information, he's like, oh, why don't I save myself the $5,000 and just pop you after I get the information and get my money back? We'll see if that ends up being how that works, but I'm just like, yeah, you're expendable. It's like the moment you've lived past for usefulness, yeah. So, because he tells BJ like, hey, they're buying up all these properties around. Like, yeah, you have the mining rights, but basically, I think just the way things are set up, he can't actually get that other pieces of land because the mining rights is one thing, but you can't get all the other land around it because it is on the reservation, and I think you legally have no claim. You can have no legal claims to it. I think that's the justification for it. I didn't completely understand all that he was explaining to the guy, but yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Once again, the fallout to all of this. Jim going home, because it's like, right, him and Emma are not in a good spot, so he's just eating food by himself. Because she wanted to bring Sally over, told Sally she could stay for as long as she wanted to, so we'll see how things kind of play out now, especially with the whole Sally thing, post all this stuff with Jim, once again, Joe and Bernadette, what that's like. I'm sure, especially after their fallout, their tussle, that Jim's going to lean even heavier into the FBI situation. So next time he pops up, he's going to be even more of a dick because of that. But I think in the end, he's going to do the right thing. I mean, once again, spoilers, because I know there are a long list of books about Jim and Joe's partnership. So that's why I was almost like, well, we know that Jim and Joe or Bernadette aren't going to die because they're major characters in the books, but also like, well, there's a lot of books, and you never know if like this could be one of those things that in the last book that was ever written, one of them dies, or like Bernadette, you never know. Which once again, I think the author's daughter took over after he died, and so Bernadette became even more of a prominent character in the books because of that. I think I talked about that in the first episode. So I'm like, okay, so she's still around even now in the book, so it's highly unlikely they would do, but you never know. Adapting something from book to TV, they could always make their own changes, so it's gonna be interesting because like the only person that's left that's out and about is James. So what does he do now that he's got he's got the cops on his trail, not just the Navajo police, but also the FBI. Plus, one of your partners is screwing you over and selling you out to BJ, so got a lot of people after you, and we'll see how that kind of plays out, because he's kind of the only one. Well, there is Sally's mom, too, but even Sally was like, oh, you're scared of my mom? You should be... I think she was most likely referencing probably, Frank is who she was referencing, him like, oh, but they're kind of saying like there was someone scarier, so... We'll ultimately have to wait and see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. It's definitely going to be interesting. But really, that's all I'm going to